Good morning, it's George Lees in his own living room making a video about how we brutalise the world, and we do it entirely for profit. So what I've done is I've opened up company check and I've now entered the term BAE Systems Limited with a gap in between the two words, okay, and we're right into the heart of the for-profit munitions manufacturer globally and all of the subsidiaries that they have. So there are 156 companies registered in the British Business Registry alone. Okay, there are 6 directors and most of them will be corporate entities. There are 8 sole traders. Let's have a wee look before we start the dissection of what they do and how they brutalise the world using NATO's armies and the corrupted governments that we have in every country across our globe now. Okay, so you've got 6 directors which are companies. So this one's BAE Systems, this one's BAE Systems. They have no birth dates and those are initials. We're not allowed to know where they are, in which country they are, and they're just postcodes. Okay. I haven't got time to open all of those. There's one in SW1 15AD, right in the heart of London, near the Bank of England, near all of the government hubs. Yeah, right by the side of that deceitful River Thames, where the elite rowers now get acts of God almost every year, and they are sponsored both by the Bank Mellon New York, which we talk about a lot in the context of World War II. Okay, BAE Systems Integrated System Technologies Limited, which is maybe why the computer and my camera crashed at the last attempt to make this movie. And you've got just a simple BAE Systems PLC. So remember, those are the directors. Yeah, those are the people in inverted commas. Yeah, and the companies all have negative equity issues. That's the toxic debt pool. Okay, the money's in the havens or in the suitcases. Goodness knows whether anybody gets any weapons, but they get brutalised all the time because of NATO's forces and our deceitful government's capacity to steal and kill globally. Okay, sole traders, there are 8 of those. Oh shit. Okay, so BAE Systems, BAE Systems, BAE Systems, they're all got the same name except these ones. BAE Systems Insight, BAE Systems Technology and Engineering, BAE Systems Surface Ships, as if they might manufacture submarines and nuclear submarines as well, but I have not looked into it that deeply. Oh, and then there's one that might well be just as frail as the others, with the minus 2 billion issues. That's BAE Systems Pension Service Centre. Okay, and I failed to spot this in my earlier visit to this site, but there are 43 European companies as well. Okay, they do not give the address for shame. There's one, Hans Stieberger Strasser. Now that could be in Germany, and it's H-A-A-R, I don't know, that's Haar. BAE Systems Deutschland GmbH. Okay, and Bad Goldgrab, Brussels, Dublin, as usual, yeah, where the sectarian problems cause a lot of problems for all of the people for 15 to 20 years or so, yeah, and it's all driven for profit. Bourges, Saint Dolchard, don't know which country that is, Rue de la Métairie, I think we might guess that that is romantic France. BAE Systems, Bourges again, Deutschland GmbH, Bonn. Okay, it's really interesting, but I don't have time. So let's open up the horrible facts about the first company we saw. When I looked at it, it was just approaching solvency, only a little bit in the red. That was some months ago, and I made this OneNote file. Okay, and there is the entry to the OneNote file. One of So that's BAE Systems Limited, BAE Systems PLC, registered address 6 Carlton Gardens, London, SW1Y5AD, company number 01470-151, okay? And it's got, as we just declared, it now, in those days, it claims to have it's got the same statistics, so 2 billion cash. Oh fuck. Sorry, this is right up to date this morning, and it's cash minus 635. No, sorry, cash is minus 6354, and it has a net worth of 6169 now. Okay, so the current statistics are totally twisted. They're now £2 billion in debt, and at this time they claim to have 8 billion in assets. So you believe what you like, but the directorates are horrific and completely condemn everything that these people do. Okay, so this is what I opened early in the morning this morning, because I caught up with my sleep patterns last night, and then I was inspired by the people in the skies that have made it a really beautiful day. Yeah, to look at BAE Systems Limited. Oh. And there's the beautiful heavenly skies and the sun god looking down on all of this. Okay, and what we've got in these sets of tabs, I'll read you the tabs first, okay, so that if I get shut down or if I lose the battery life, we can. Okay, so in 10 rather, which was the year we came back to England, or it was the year when we came back in December 2009, when I was away. This company had 90,000 employees, as if nobody was going to investigate their activity when I was away. We've got links to Portillo, we've got links to the Russia Foundation, we've got horrific links to a man called King on the BAE systems listings within this company. We've got the Eden Trust, we've got the Eden Boar, and we've got Eddy George, who's the governor of the Bank of England for a long time. And I used to be a student in Woolwich, very near where the Lawrence killing occurred, and I lived with one of the Bank of England employees, and the wife in that house, in, I forget what the suburb was, Eltham, okay? It's got the word ham in it. And I lived in that suburb really happily, and I played rugby for Thames Polytechnic and for Blackheath. Yeah, and the Blackheath properties were so elite that we could never expand the rugby pitches, but I did not realise the significance of my landlord in the boarding houses activities at the Bank of England until I became really sophisticated. His wife kindly published my thesis on a BBC computer, and I've just realised that almost all of the computers I used in the early days of my career were provided by friends of my family. That's Stephen Andrew Hancock's OBE, and I talk about him a lot. He's very ashamed about what he's done, which is why you can no longer find him on YouTube other than in the videos I make. Okay, and what we've got now is the name Portillo, the Russia Foundation, the BAE King, the Eden Trust. Wow, the Eden Boardroom is quite magnificent, and the links to the Jewish movements and all of the Zionist activities take you into revolutionary Cornwall. We'll get to that in due course. There's the Eddy George name again, and we've got the Grosvenor groupings and the foundations. The Grosvenors are some of the richest people on our globe. And lastly, we've got another link to the Douglas homes, but this time they're in Douglas and Angus in Scotland. And I think it's an Earl this time, it's not the Prime Ministerial family. From Coldstream, where they still sell the dead man's boots, and that wowed John Patterson. Because of my emphasis on Zionism, I want you to know that this is not about religion or anti-Semitic, because all of the people, Portillo and all of the people that are on these English groupings, are really, really vicious people, and they brutalise the world without thinking twice. Okay, so let's open up the tab that we've got. So that just, and the link to this was the earlier video I made on Lord Hollick of Notting Hill and his massive interlocks with power brokers in the global cabal that now runs the world. And that's part of the Notting Hill Miss Scott jokes that takes us back into the borders and the cabal of massive landowners that still own Scotland and run its political puppets. Okay, until I come along and they have to start resigning and closing their corrupted financial institutions, but only the innocent staff take the fall. That's the issue of Stormouth Darling that we keep talking about. Okay, so what have we got here? 90,000 in employees, and what I was shocked by was the actual listings. So this is the company check days before they made it impossible to see accurate listings, and there's where it takes us into, right into the heart of London. Okay, right into the adjacent regions to MI6 and our Parliament buildings, like all of the war criminals, which Portillo uncontestably is. Okay, Slough and Windsor also mentioned in passing, Dartford and Woolwich, Reigate, Berkhamsted, Hemel Hempstead, they just keep cropping up. That is where I worked for Welcome before it became insolvent, and Berkhamsted is where we were our headquarters were, and that's where the nerve gases are studied at Rothamsted. And all of it is hauntingly familiar to me, and that's where Elton John used to run the football club. Yeah, right then, what have we got on this one? So One Bishop Square, St Albans, Hatfield, Hertfordshire. No, I don't know what's happened to this file since I looked at. I created this on the wee computer across there, and I'm making the video here because of the hum issues on that computer. And look at the trading addresses all over Britain: Hatfield, Hertfordshire, Carlton Gardens, London, Middleton, Manchester. Oh, might that be a reason why we picked the Princess? Plymouth, Devon, PL66DE, Northamptonshire, where Lady Di came from, Brooklands House, Hitchin, Hertfordshire. I went for interviews there in the pharma sector with now collapsed pharmaceutical companies in the massive frauds that they run all the time. Farnborough, Hampshire, where the airbase is. Bristol, Avon, no surprises. Wolverhampton, West Midlands. Usk in Gwent, in Wales. Caxton Street, London, SW1H, OQT. Wolverhampton, West Midlands. Kingston upon Thames, Surrey. Stockport, Cheshire. Glasgow, Lanarkshire. Waterlooville, Hampshire. That's the Waterloo triumph at the Bank of England again. Bristol, Avon, Bishopton, Renfrewshire, where Jim Murphy is the MP and the Clusha pub beneficiary from all of the virtual news that all of the Friends of Israel release, even although they're Gentiles and they're doing okay like the Lumberjacks. 51 Little France Crescent, Edinburgh, Midlothian, where the Midlothian reputational crisis has happened, because I've sussed the Rothschilds out and the Cairn Energy Empire as well, and they're ever so nervous about that. And thank you to all of the people in the border towns in the last few weeks who have been signing that you understand why your pension is crashed and who the culprits are now. Crewe Toll, Ferry Road, Edinburgh, Midlothian. very close to where the head of the Catholic Church is, and I attended the inauguration of Archbishop Leo Kuthley, or Cardinal Leo Kuthley, and all of the corrupted politicians were there. And you had to pay for the coffee. They went elsewhere to celebrate the coming together of the church and the politicians. Okay, Dorchester, Dorset, Chorley, Lancashire, Manchester, Lancashire, Telford, Shropshire, Leicester, Leicestershire, Comet Way, Hatfield, Hertfordshire, Dunsfold Aerodrome, Godalming, Surrey, Lostock Lane, Bolton, Lancashire, One Lives Vane Road, Cardiff, South Glamorgan, North Humberside, Blackburn, Lancashire, Preston, Lancashire, the Pizzo joke again, embedded in the name, and Robert Peston gets launched to tell lies, and his wife dies really young. And my brother has several mates in Preston who are very reluctant to talk about anything now on YouTube for exposure reasons. Bristol Avon, and then Midlothian again, EH12 9EA, Yeovil, Somerset, where the two Ronnies tack with the straw in their mouth. Yeah, and right next to Portendown and the Somerset floods. Okay, Castle Street, Fareham, Hampshire, Prestwick Airport, Ayrshire, where the man who's now in charge of my divorce case was a director for many years, with massive links to the Mortons and the Morton frauds in the money laundering sector, which he does not think was a conflict of interest. When I asked him yesterday, he's the most decent sheriff I've met, and I was allowed actually to talk in the court yesterday and given a further abeyance, so I'm still married. So any aspirant girlfriends, you'll have to hold off for a little bit longer. Okay, Fareham, Hampshire, that's where the triumvirate run the drugs for Prince Philip out of England into the South Pacific, and the interlocks to all of that was Lord Hollick of Notting Hill, and the Notting Hill film that was made with the links to Shania Twain, having a laugh at how the world's former working class people are now stealing as elite people from the rest of their country. The exemplification of that in Scotland is Anne Gloag, Scotland's richest woman, who will not let people walk on her land anymore. And the man, Peter Watson, interlocks with the man who's now in charge of my divorce case, but he does not think it's a conflict of interest yet. I think he's the 5th sheriff we've had. Okay, right then, 90,000 employees in... Here we go. Now, I was quite stunned when I read this, but I don't want to waste a lot of time on just identifying the cover-ups for it. Okay, so there we've got the current boardroom. Carol George Simon, the launch of Carly Simon, the pop singer. Christopher Montague Grigg. Okay, that's the Montagues of the Duke of Buccleuch line again. Mr. Ian Graham King. There is more on him. He's the BAE king that I've focused on, because he's crashed 79 of his 85 companies and only 6 remain open. Mr. Ian Graham King. Ian Paul Tyler, Nicholas Charles Rose. Now he's got even more, and it's quite shocking what he does. He's crashed 124 of the 125 companies that were run. Okay, and I played rugby with the Rose in the Aylesbury region, where a lot of the financial employees now come from, and that man was a really gifted rugby player and a really decent looking chap. We went sledging with him and the Frankels, who are on a lot of these listings, yeah, and all of them have had minor cardiovascular accidents, and some of them, as I told you the other day, dropped dead on the cricket pitches. Okay, and what we've got further down is a Linus, a Harriet Green, a Reynolds, and Katie Price with the tits. Her real name is Charlie, and I played rugby with a Charlie as well, and I played rugby with a Ripper Reynolds. Okay, Sir Martin Carr, that's the launch of Jimmy Carr, the comedian. Okay, so that's the current board, and what we'll do later on is to look down at some of the things that they do, particularly the ones that do the crashing. So that's Mr. King, and that is Mr. Nicholas Charles Rose. Okay? Ah, shit. So it's the 6 Carlton Gardens registration, and you believe what you like about their solvency or their debt pool, but let's just keep going down. So there's how this was captured almost a year ago, I think, and now we've got there the listings of what is online, an actual graph. Yeah, so you can look that up. The name of the, I'll give you the name of the website at the bottom that will let you look at the whole of the graph, how long the people have served, and what the people like Portillo did when they were in office, okay, and what their term of office was. Now, you can, in this version, okay, so there's the current directors. Let's go now. So the current secretary is David Stanley Parks. Then we get into the listing of the previous directories. So Lord Hollick of Notting Hill served between 92 and 97. Okay, 37 of his companies, which were 40, crashed. Lord George Simpson, all the elite names are in here. Lord Thomas Alexander Hesketh, Lord James Blythe of Rowington, Mr. Andrew George Inglis, Mr. Brian Cookson, Mr. Christopher Vincent Gagan, the launch of the Irish rugby winger that Bill McLaren used to get so excited about, and his daughter is married to my sister's neighbour, and that is the piss taker that is Rory Bremner. Yeah. He scammed me into an interview in Edinburgh, which is part of his comedies. Yeah. And the people that live across the road, my sister, refused to give me a lift to the courts yesterday because they're now working with my wife. Yeah, and it is just totally twisted. But their children realise the might of my issue, as does her sister-in-law, who when they were younger kicked her out the bed because they couldn't get on as local people. Anyway, that's Gagan, the cover that was the former Irish rugby player. Mr. George Wilfred Rose, that would be the parental generation for the Roses. I don't know whether I met his dad at Aylesbury Rugby Club. Mr. John Conway Cahill, they keep coming in. The next one's a really big and sinister joke because it combines Mr. John P. Pix Weston, combines the Piso fraud and the Western Turville massacre of sinking the French and Spanish navies in 2 concurrent years, and the admiral was Turville, and that's why they changed the name of the local village, where they still use the silkworms as a joke about taking silk in the judiciary, and how they win every case they enter, and how they fund every side in every war and every conflict. Okay, but remember, this is only BAE Systems. It's not nearly as powerful as the Rothschilds themselves. Okay. Have we missed something? Mr. Keith Clark Brown, Mr. Lee Allen McIntyre. I've worked with professors, and we got my computer crashed when I looked into the McIntyres that worked for Miss Tom the other day. They operate out of Ayr and Shotts in Lanarkshire, and they run corrupted wind farms. And when you look at their ancient cars or vintage car company, they have no directors on the director listing. Yeah, it's really, really evil how the whole world is run now. And thank you to the people of the borders for talking to me about that honestly and openly. Right then. Mr. Michael Lester, this is the former directorates. Mr. Michael Turner, Paolo Scaroni, Peter Armory Weinberg, Philip Joseph Carroll Jr., nothing to add on name. Richard, nothing to add. Oh, then we get somebody with the middle name Patton. We've got a Leonard Kirk, couple of jokes in there that you already understand. A Mr. Robert Patton Bowman, Stephen Lewis Mugford, Miss Linda Parker Hudson, and there's a Sidney Gillibrand, maybe the launch of Ed Miliband and his brother from Lithuania, the socialists in inverted commas, and the brother fled the week that I put the guillotine on the front page of my website, along with the picture of Stephen Hester. That's the jester joke, the head of the RBS, totally twisted, and all of them now in the Lloyds Banking Group toxic debt pool, which is many, many trillions. Okay, Sir Professor Susan Joyce Birley, Ravi Kant Upal, Sir Anthony Nigel Russell Rudd, and Macefield. Macefields are the elite writers. Sir Richard Beach Gordon Macefield, Sir Judson Graham Day, Sir Peter James Mason, and Sir Peter Oliver Gershon, which is a joke about Gershon in the Black Sea region, and Glasgow Rangers, the Gers, Sir Richard Lake Olver, Sir Robert Adair Bigham, and the Right Honourable Klaus Hampel, who takes us into some of the other tabs below, the Right Honourable Michael Denzel Xavier Portillo, who will now investigate and profile for you. Okay? I think he's the one that does the train trips now. He was part of the team that made the panorama video before they did the London bombing terror, where they had to kill the terrorists because they missed the train and they were shot dead under the massive HSBC building in Canary Wharf, where my brother-in-law worked in his property worth £250,000, not nearly as much as the other one, which is worth £670,000. Yeah, and when I became a fraud researcher, my wife began to think about divorcing me within 2 weeks of my mortgage being paid off. Anyway, and our brother at that stage was deemed to be funding the proceedings. Okay, so this is Michael Denzel Xavier Portillo, Suite 99R, 34 Buckingham Palace Road, London, SW1WORH. That's where they wave the little flags for the illegitimate monarchy every now and again, and every Remembrance Sunday they have to come out and celebrate their triumphs. Okay, so there's the directors for that. We've got there's the director for the periods up to 31st of 12th 2013. I think we might have missed a bit. No. Okay, so the Parliamentary Committee again. So this is one of his branches. Let's start further down. Oh, it doesn't go further down. We could look for Denzel. What was his name? We could look for Right Honourable Michael Denzel Xavier. So now that's the type of graphs you used to be able to produce on Company Check. No longer can I do that. So this is one of his companies, and I'm going to have to reopen his site if we want to profile that. But you now know the terms that you need to enter. That's the Right Honourable Michael Denzel Xavier with an X at the front, Portillo with 2 L's. Okay? And that is just one of the companies, but I kind of see what it is. So directors and the people that are still on the board, or were on the board right up to 2010 in Portillo's case. Yeah, that's when I came back home. Okay, and when they had the 90,000 employees, or sharing the corrupted funds. Okay? Right Honourable Michael Denzel Xavier Portillo, Mr Stuart Mark Levy, Mr Jonathan Neil Mendelsohn, Lord Peter Kingsley Archer, that's Lord Archer, do you remember them? Lord Hunt of Wirral, David James Fletcher Hunt, Lord Greville Ewan Janner, Miss Mandy Louise Bennell, Mr William David Rosen, Mr Trevor Stephen Pears, Mr Stephen Rubin, Mr John Alexander Metlis, Mr John Lewis Gibson. So the one way to get his listings is to go back to what I've got. If anybody wants this PDF, you just write to me and I can send it. Okay, let's find him on the listing and open his hyperlink again. Sometimes this crashes the computer, so we'll build the adrenaline slowly. Right then, so there it is, it's a hyperlink. If you click on it, we should get all of his corporate dirty tricks. The suspense is killing me. While we're waiting, let's just open another tab. Oh, is it going to do it quickly? So there's the Russian Foundation, which is the link to that man, Sir Ronald Klaus Hampel. Okay, let's have a wee look at, oh no, here we go. So this is us. We'll close the BAE system so the computer doesn't get locked up. And I've already shown you the pictures of minor munitions, yeah? But this will take us all the way up to nuclear weaponry. Buckingham Palace Road, and if we just scan down here, his interlocks will be horrific, but we don't have time to do that. If you wanted to, from this point, you would just click on directors, but we'll go down and see which companies he is a director of. Here we go. The Parliamentary Committee Against Anti-Semitism Foundation, which is where I found the man that I just cited as the man who's on the Russian funding stuff. Association of Conservative Clubs Limited, that ties in Michael Ancram, John Major and all of the people that run the Conservative Club and their funding base for ages. Yeah, BAE Systems PLC, and the Conservative Clubs thing is relatively innocent because it's legitimately declared that these people actually come together in a defined place, and even there we do not get any publications about what they talk about. Victoria Square Gardens Limited. Now last night when I looked at this, I believe there were 6 companies, but that could be some of the older companies. No, oh yeah, Sinfonia 21, the Parliamentary Committee Against Anti-Semitism Foundation. Okay, the Association of Conservative Clubs Limited, the BAE Systems PLC, Victoria Square Gardens Limited, the Shrubbery for the illegitimate Queen and the victimised Queen who was imposed her sexual acts in her bedroom because Prince Albert was a hopeless homosexual. And look up Prince Albert's chain on Wikipedia, but do not let your children under age do it. It will bring tears to your eyes, because the chain that he wore made him incapable of having sex, and he was killed because he was one of the most innocent people in this whole story. Okay, where are we down to? Let's see what else we get. Nothing else. Okay, so you have a look for yourself, learn how to use it, and get in touch with me if you want to expose the local criminals in your region. And if you want to make a video with me, I would be very grateful for your courage and integrity. And well, let's go back to the tab we were on. So the man at the bottom is Sir Ronald Klaus Hampel, and this takes us into the Russia Foundation. I don't believe I've profiled the anti-Semitic committee, but you know now how to find that, and you'll see that it is not it's all the elites in all the denominations, all the religions, and even the union leaders. All of them are at the trough. So there's the Russia Foundation, its directors and secretaries, but because that has collapsed, I will open it again and let you see who's on it. I kind of think that there were people of great merit. So Mendelssohn's on this too. Staples, Darren Young, Phillips, Andrew Janis Folkmanis, Simon Frank George Miller, Brad Staples, the Russia Foundation. Okay, so all of this is registered in the UK. And I found it through the anti-Semitic Mendelssohn issue. So if we were to open that and click on Mendelssohn, we'll see who's on the anti-Semitic thing. Get used to using Company Check. It's great fun. And you can see how the interlocks always follow the wheel and spoke model that Gordon Bowden and I have profiled in many, many situations. Okay, so what are we looking for? We're looking for former secretaries, and it was Mr. Mendelssohn, I think, that we get the links to the Jewish issues. So John Patterson tried to make a video, or he invited me to make a video on how Christianity is being abused by the Jews. John Patterson totally understands that the religious keywords are totally irrelevant to the fraud. All of them are totally together and are entirely for profit. Okay, so let's see whether we can find that Jewish anti-Semitic organisation. So Holocaust Educational Trust, yeah, they're all using the propaganda from decades ago, and the Rothschilds sit quietly in the background, and they still get the reparations for everything from the creation of the Panama Canal to the creation of Israel. The Finchley Jewish Primary School Trust, the New Israel Fund, the European Educational Research Trust Limited, the Parliamentary Committee Against Anti-Semitism, Europa Hospitals Spain Limited, Europa Hospitals Group Limited, Europa Hospitals UK Limited, Green Bay Capital Limited, Red Capital, GDSS Limited, Heath Street Limited, the Real One Partnership, Kinloss Educational Trust, Progress Limited, Cedars Oak Limited, Red Bus Group Limited, Frank's Family Foundation, Russia Foundation. Yeah, he's on the board, this guy, Mendelssohn, from 2008 to 2012 when I was away. But then he bails out in 2012 when I become a fraud researcher. Right then, Newco Red Capital Limited. Where is the Holocaust Educational Trust? Yeah, and everything is totally twisted. New Israel Fund, European Educational Trust Limited. Where is the anti-Semitic one? Parliamentary Committee Against Anti-Semitism Foundation. Right then. It's still running. Yeah, for obvious reasons which John has asked me to comment on this morning, and I refused politely to engage in any form of sectarian activity. Registered, Great Smith Street, Westminster, London, SW1P 3BU. Directors. I should have looked at the money at the bank, but we don't have enough time for that. Right Honourable Michael Denzel Xavier Portillo, Right Honourable Hunt of Wirral, Lord Peter Kingsley Archer, all of the people that are involved in all of the conflicts for many, many years. And there's a levy, that's the levy and McRae's, that are in league with Peter Watson in all of the virtual news profiteering scandals and are involved in the running of Miss Anne Gloag's declaration that any visitor to Perthshire cannot roam on her land, even Scottish citizens. Then you've got the Lord Archer, the Janners. It's the same boardroom. Okay, we've been through that I think already. Okay, and let's go back to the OneNote pages. So the BAE King, and this spooked me. It really spooked me, because this is not a celebrity or a war criminal from the Parliament buildings. I've never heard of him before. It could be one of Mervyn's children, but that's a conspiracy theory, and I try not to do that, as the sheriff pointed out yesterday, that all of the crimes in the sectors where I've got his director numbers that link him into McCletchy, the head of the Better Off Together movement, would not be a conflict in the year that the sheriffs, the solicitors, the legal system, the politicians sold Scotland's freedom to the corrupted crown. BAE King. And it might be better to have gotten him. Oh shit. We'll have to go back to the original listing to find him. So this is good because it gives you the experience of how we find someone on company check, and that. So the King. Let's see if we can find him. There we are, Ian Graham King. I'll click on that now. Wait for it. Yeah, and you'll see in the graphs, because you cannot upload them now, you cannot keep databases that are easy to understand and can be quickly relayed to the victims of all of this, who are the investors, the savers and the pensioners, yeah, and the people that pay the taxes, because the treasury is totally emptied. Are we going to get it? The suspense is killing me. And so his director number is 90148235. It's ever so slow because it's ever so massive. Must stop using that word. Okay. Right then, Carlton Gardens, London, BAE Systems, they live right in the headquarters. We get nothing to know anything about their actual source or where they come from. Okay. And what we'll get now is probably a massive ad getting in our way. But let's have a look down at the bottom. If we were now to click on directors, we'd get the interlocks in every one of those 85 companies, most of whom he has crashed. We don't have time to do that, so we just scan down and you'll find his directorial listings under his own name. Okay, he's got BAE Systems PLC, that's 14 billion current assets value. Cash is 2 billion and current liabilities are 17 billion, another toxic debt pool. Isn't that clever? And what I see in the court every week that I attend it, it has got people who are tenants and get drunk and they're looking ever so nervous about being banged up in the jail because they cannot pay their rent, and they get totally robbed as students now, and if they get a little bit drunk as a response to that, then they are potentially banged up as well. It is totally vicious. The sun has gone in temporarily. Let's just keep going down. Year of birth 1956. Everything he got from free he's stripping from the children of the world now, and the BAE Systems is designed to kill the people in the peace-loving countries that cannot afford weaponry to defend themselves, and all of God's laws are totally abused of all of the time. But I was delighted to hear that in the oath yesterday to what you were telling lies about in the marital proceedings was that they swear an oath not to Jesus Christ but to the Lord in the skies. And that is a little sly joke about them being the Lord's, and you have to call them malud, and you have to stand up as a religious gesture when they enter and leave the courtroom. It's pathetic, and they're all cheap shot criminals, but this is the most decent one that I've met so far, and he's conciliatory because it's the proof trial, and he's given me a couple more months to get my evidence base together in a state that they can understand the magnitude of the issues that are the closure of all our law enforcement institutions and the asset stripping of everything that the state used to own. Okay. another toxic debt pool. Let me just reel off his companies. Okay, here's the graph. So BAE Systems In-Flight Overseas Limited, CellXX Electronics Optics Overseas Limited, UK Council for Electronic Business, Aerosystems International Limited, BAE Systems Surface Ship Support Limited, BAE Systems Land and Sea Systems Pension Scheme Alvis Limited, BAE Systems Operations Limited, BAE Systems Oman Limited. That's Oman, where they had the nuclear weapons go missing into the ocean. Yeah, BAE Systems Holdings Limited, BAE Systems PLC, BAE Systems Integrated System Technologies Limited, BAE Systems Electronics Limited, Salford Electrical Instruments Limited, Marconi 22. That might have been one of the names for Ferranti in Scotland at one point in our sad history, where the employees there can no longer afford to live on the pension, even although they've worked there for all of their lives. No names mentioned. SelectS International Limited, BAE Systems China Exports Limited, BAE Systems Stanmore Limited, MMS Space UK Limited, Airbus Defence and Space Limited. That takes us into the European Boeing transatlantic Airbus wars and the Concorde project, and all of them are massive scams against the people, and they keep the people divided and chattering about how evil the EU is as a premeditated gesture to explain away why they steal from all of the global citizens, and they blame the Europeans for it. CellXS Infrared Limited, BAE Systems Aberdeen Limited, where all the Islamic terrorists come from, and there are about 14,000 registered people called Mr. Islam in the UK Business Directory. BAE Systems Limited, Integrated System Technologies, CellXS Limited, Thales Underwater Systems Limited. You now understand the Thales joke? That's the Christian cross, and hell, underwater systems. Yet so underground in Paris is hell, and underground in the nuclear submarine is potentially the way that we're going to get sent to it. Yeah, I don't know whether or not there is an afterlife, and I don't care. I'm a moralist, and I'm trying to save my children's future and the global children's future. BAE Systems Surface Ships Limited, BAE Systems Projects Limited, MBDA UAE, that's United Arab Emirates, where the Borders College and Michael Moore's P&O companies are registered so that they can defraud the world without anybody being able to regulate them. And George W. Bush is involved in the P&O empire, and it's openly declared on Wikipedia. At least it was when I last looked. Flagship Firefighting Training Limited, Babcock Flagship Limited, BAE Systems Pension Funds SIF Trustees Limited, Rotork PLC, BAE Systems Pension Funds Trustees Limited. That's the end of the list. Okay, right then, let's find the other person. So where were we? We went into that. So that's the king, and we need to go back to this, and let's close that so the computer does not freeze. That's the Parliamentary Committee Against Anti-Semitism. And all of those have a very long lifespan. All of the members of the board. Okay, let's back to the listings here, and let's find that other guy who's got Mr. Nicholas Charles Rose, who's crashed 124 of the 125 companies. Okay, it is just shocking. So this takes you into Diageo, the brutalisation of Africa, and friends that I have who lived in New Zealand, then lived in Kelso, and they are also part of the Watson dynasty. Okay, I don't know whether or not he's an innocent man or not. He seems to be. His wife is a Kiwi, and they talk to me on the streets openly, so relatively decent. His Diageo company is all over Africa. Right then. And they purport to have a philosophy that they give jobs to the local people, which is why there is scope for hope, and why I've told you his real name, or his surname. Right then, so Mr. Nicholas Charles Rose, and here we go. and the Diageo is just a tiny part of this. It's still a beautiful day since we stopped talking about Portillo and Tony Blair's spin doctors and the Conservative equivalents. It's a really beautiful day. Yet the breeze is picking up a little bit. Okay, here we go. 6 Carlton Gardens, BAE Systems again, right in the hub. We don't get to know about his location in his earlier activities, but just scan that. If we went for his interlocks with that number of companies, we would get a profiling of the whole of the globalized fraud. Okay, so we don't click on directors this time, we just go straight down to see what those 125 companies are or were. So the combined cash at bank values where Nicholas holds a current equivalent is 2 billion. The total current assets are 5 billion and the current liabilities are 8 billion. So they're 3 billion in the red. Oh no, 1 billion in the red. So every one of these companies so far has been in a toxic debt pool, and the crashed ones are already gone with their cash and with all of the proceeds from that illicit crime, and they get laundered all over the world. And none of it pays any tax, which is why the treasury is empty. And this is just one of the 100 and, what was it in the first few minutes of the video, I think it was 170 or so. 12 Island Shipping Company, Cellars Wine, Diageo, CL1. When you get numbered listings like that, you can almost bet your boots that it is a Ponzi shelf. W&A Gilby Limited, Diageo Holland Investment Limited, Otford Estates Limited, and when they line up like this, it's called pump and dump. Yeah, so everything is in the ownership, and suddenly it's disappeared, and suddenly it changes its name, and it's in another continent, or it's in the Caymans. Okay, Diageo Balkans Limited, Grand Metropolitan Limited, Diageo Finance PLC, Justerini and Brooks Limited. That's the Hitler's birthplace joke again. Def Investments Limited, Carillon UK Limited, J&B Scotland Limited. I doubt that the J word is justice, but they'd laugh at everything they do. United Distillers UK PLC, Scottish Power Limited. Yeah, that's the big 6 energy companies privatised by John Major and Mrs T, and all of the successors are now privatising everything, including the care homes. And I talked to Miss Tom about what she did at the council yesterday, and it was a bit vague, but when I kept showing her the statistics on the 2 million people that were killed needlessly as innocent bystanders in Iraq, she did appear to get a little bit quaky, but they still use the same "I need someone to defend me from his potential to attack me" issues, which they used in 2011 to try and get me sectioned before the weight of all of my public work protected me. Okay, Diageo Great Britain Limited, Gleneagles Hotels Limited, that's the Alex Salmond Donald Trump scam again. Yeah, the golf course issues and the wind power issues. Gleneagles Resort Developments Limited, Diageo Scotland Limited, Diageo PLC, Diageo Pension Trust Limited, and we'll get an even bigger list, I believe. Vox Wine Company, Buxton Norton and Language. So these are the dissolved companies: Airbrook Management Services, Cellars, Wine Mine Club Limited, John B. Wilson's and Son Limited, International Distillers. Okay, Montagna Marketing Limited, Stidle Limited, Percy Fox and Co Limited, Vale and Amory Limited. Okay, do you get the magnitude of it? It is massive. All of the things you hear in the newspapers are covers for it. Wine Traders Consortium Limited, remember the David Murray stories about Sean Connery and treating Sean Connery's heart attack, which the media are not allowed to talk about in case the elites panic about God catching up with them, which I believe is why the sun is pouring out every time I make the videos, and every time they try and divert me into the marital proceedings. I'm now going to sector my time much more carefully, because each time they invite me to the court, they get my data,
They pretend to have received it. They tell me they've received it, and when I get to court, it's gone missing, like yesterday. So they've given me another 6 weeks or so to get my data together in an understandable way. And when it's understood, they are totally complicit in all of these crimes. But the sheriff did not think there were any conflicts. That will be in a later video. And it pertains to people called Desmond Morton in wartime, and law companies that use the name Morton as Ponzi shells in the solicitors' firms in Scotland. Strathleven Bonded Warehouses, Hoybloin Europe Limited, Strathspey Highland Malt Whisky Company, Chelsea Gin Company Limited, the Morgan Furs of Brick Street Limited, Sacconi and Speed West Indies Limited, one of the outlets for the tax evasion, Diageo CL1 Limited, Roberts Hotels Limited, Morgan Brothers London Limited, famous name, W&A Gilby Limited, Dexter's Isotonics. There's so many of them. Let's just keep going down. If one catches my eye, and Taipan Trading Company Limited, Intrapreneur Pub Company, Intrapreneur Pub Company CH Limited, Wines of Greece Limited, Dominic's Horsam Limited, Bodegas Laguna, Grand Metropolitan Limited, Robertson Son Worthing Limited, Claude Baker Arthur Cooper Wine Merchant. Let's just keep going. It is massive. No, I mustn't say that. Precis D. Cameron and Company Limited. I did not spot that one. Director 1996 to 1999. Now if that uses David Cameron as an ID, I suspect very much that that will not be David Cameron. But nobody's got the right to know. You don't even need a passport photo to register on the corporate registrations. Glen Spey Limited, Andrew Lang and Company Limited, J&B Scotland Limited, United Distillers UK, Scottish Power rather, Pressy 1111 Limited. Isn't that funny? That's the same as Executive Order 1111 that JFK, the day that JFK died, was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson on Air Force One, and all of that becomes the Air Force One movie, and all of the villains are deemed to be in Kazakhstan as subsidiaries of this. But that's how they twist the story. It is totally twisted. BAE Systems PLC, still a director. Isn't that clever? He's still in the toxic debt pools, and all the money they've made from all of these shells are elsewhere. Gleneagles Hotels Limited, Gleneagles Resort Developments. Right then, let's get back to the other tab. So we've done the BAE King, the Eden Trust now. This takes us into, from this link to the Russia Foundation through Klaus Hampel in revolutionary Jewish Cornwall, Lord David Ernest Putnam, the director of the Chariots of Fire film, the Chancellor of Sunderland University when I became a professor, and we've found at long last Eddy George, the predecessor to Mervyn King, the fraudster, as the head of the Bank of England before the fraudster came from Canada. Yeah, and it takes us also into the now legendary trillion-dollar profiteer that is Sir John Mainwaring Robertson at the HSBC. I do not have time to tell you his story again, but that is Captain Mannering's joke. And the Robertson jam jar black man joke, send them to their deaths in every conflict once we no longer need them as slaves, because we have the internal combustion engine and the tank to make the whole project really efficient. So there's the chain of command that I used to find the Eden Trust, okay, and it's through that Hampel linkage to the anti-Semitic organisation, I think it was. Okay, so registered address Bodelva, Par, a golfing term, Cornwall, PL24 2SG, the Eden Trust, registered number 044870099. Right, and company status, green for go and steal from the world. Right then, so if we want to find that, so we should have gone Eddy George. Let's see if I can find him. Okay, now he's famous because he was the boss at the Bank of England when I was doing my PhD at Woolwich, and this is when I was in the lodging place at Woolwich. So the directors at the Eden Trust are Lady Mary Christina Holborough, she's still current, Mr. Edward Anfred Pringle Benthall. Is the Benthall a service station on the motorways? Miss Tina Dawn Bingham, Miss Lucy Blaze Parker, Sir Anthony Michael Vaughan Salts, Sir Gillian Ptolemy Prance, Sir John Edward Victor Rose, that's a big wig in the Rose family that I've told you about 2 generations already, Sir Simon Mainwaring Robertson, the trillionaire at the big corrupted New World Order banks, Lord David Terence Putnam, the head of all of those movies for all of those decades, and the launch of the Mr. Bean joke at the London Olympics and the religious joke about not running for your country on a Sunday. He is totally vicious, yeah, and he's a Jew. And all of them are at the trough. It does not matter what their declared religion in, like their affiliation to political parties. Lord Patton was a Labour man, then became the head of the Conservative Party, then became the governor of Hong Kong, and he's in the Oxford Union, and all of it is totally twisted, and he's the head of the Oxford Russia Fund with the Rothschilds, and he's now dead because nobody's prepared to talk about him. He had his heart attack over a year ago. Mr. Guy Ainsworth Whaley, Mr. Peter Mark Cox, Mr. Richard Cotton Cunis, Mr. Stephen Thomas Lloyd. So I've captured these as stills because they've twisted now. Okay, and this takes us into Edward Allen John George. So this is Eddy George at the Bank of England, the Grosvenor Group, one of the richest families in the world, the Eden Trust that we've just read out in Cornwall, the Cornwall Community Foundation. Now Cornwall is alleged to be full of left-wingers, and it's a revolutionary place, and it bears the castle Tintagel, burnt to a crisp like all of the Borders abbeys, except those south of the English border, which are still intact and can be used as the Church of England vent. And I wonder, because we were married in the Church of England and that we've got the proceedings up here in the Church of Scotland region, whether or not I might find grounds for appeal when they get over with my persecution in the court. I don't give a shit about all of that. I'm pinning them for these major financial crimes and genocides. Bank of England, Nominees Limited, confirmation that he's been and gone with all of the treasury funds and everything that could be publicly owned, dismembered very early in his lifespan as a fraudster. Then the NM Rothschild and Sons Limited label, yeah, that's the General Sir Charles Guthrie label. That is the people that steal from the Student Loans Project. Oh no, that's the Rothschild Bank, sorry, I've done them a grave injustice. And the grave joke is the shrubbery that they get rewarded for, and all of their war crimes, and they get buried in, very near Tottenham Hotspur, in the case of the man with the golden penis that is Nathan Mayer Rothschild. And it is all told by the pythons and the jokers that cover up their every crime. So here's the Grosvenor Group. Okay, and the Eden Board, so we've missed that, I think. The Grosvenor Group is Christopher Dale Pratt. Now do you remember in the fatal scene in the trenches where Blackadder laughs at the almost certain death of all of the British troops in World War I, that he wants just to go back to his wife at Pratt and Sons? Mr. Christopher Dale Pratt is the first director on this listing. Okay, Weingarters, Newsom, Preston again, Mr. Michael George Alexander McClintock, Richard Scarlett, Judith Patricia Ball, Leslie Mary Samuel Knox, a sectarian name. Ah, merde. Right then, so this is just a screen capture, and what we've got is more names on the listing. Alistair George Morrison, maybe the launch of James Morrison, the pop singer, who himself had major issues with the quality of his condition when he was a youngster. The songs that you make are really, really good, and a lot of them touch on really, really innocent and loving issues. I love his music. Mr. Andrew John Booby, Mr. Anthony Blake Wyand, oh, here's the South African connection, Mr. Douglas Robert Jan de Brokert, Mr. Edward Allen John George, Eddy George, head of the Bank of England. I forget what we're on. We're on the Grosvenor group. Can you see the massive conflicts and how they steal from the people right at the head of society, and how they steal from democracy through the central bank and then into private funds? Okay, Mr. George Ian Macloy Coburn, a Scottish name, Mr. John Richard Sclater, Mr. Jonathan Osborne Haga, another politician launched, and he's a secretary. He's registered twice back to back with overlapping periods. That's insider trading. Okay, that is not a thin blue line director secretarial issue. That is a long period of overlap. Yeah, and this is the company that run in the name of one of our richest families and richest dynasties. Mr. Mark Anthony Loveday, Mr. Kurt Fridolin Viermetz, Mr. Malton Aldred, Mr. Neil Jones, Mr. Nicholas James Laup, Mr. Owen David Thomas, Mr. Peter Sean Vernon, Mr. Ralph William Hayward, Mr. Raymond Charles Williams. Okay, I can't see anything very sinister in any of those. Mr. Robert Byers Kerr. Oh, everybody catches up with the Kerrs at some time or other in my lifetime. Yeah, and the Kerr family and the Duke there up on the castle adjacent to us gets the best weather patterns in our country. And I know he's a decent chap, particularly since he had his throat cancer, and he cares about it, and he was on Easter Sunday at the church. I've accused his family of being Jewish because of the marriage of Winston Churchill's cousin to one of his great grannies. Yeah, but it is really good that they understand the gravity of the situation, unless he was at church to laugh at the religious con. But I don't believe so. I met him when he had his first child by his second wife. I've talked to him ever since, and every time he's decent enough to have a little chat, but we chat about trivial things, and I really need to engage them all, along with Michael Ancram, also a Kerr, in a serious grown-up discussion about how to come simply out of the fraudulent world we live in into civilization. It's really easy to do, and that's why the sun keeps coming out. But none of them, apart from Michael Ancram, have had the courage to step forward, and I'm really grateful to him. That's the Marquis of Lothian, who I exposed as a cover for the crimes of the Rothschilds in Lothian Road. Okay, we've got Musgraves, Beavors, Abelman, William J. Abelman, Alison Ann Hargreaves, which is a famous name but I don't know why, Miss Caroline Mary Tolhurst, Sir John Nigel Courtney James, and just as a curtain call, we've got Swift Incorporations Limited. Yeah, David Alexander Cospatrick Home. Let me get his official title correct. That's the Holmes of Coldstream, I thought. The Earl of Home, David Alexander Cospatrick Home, ran in this business from, this is the Grosvenor Group, between 2006 and 2011, when the banks were crashed. And I've told you about the other Douglas Homes being involved with JP Morgan and George Soros during the same period, and that ties in Michael Moore and the ballistic little blonde that refused to accept any of my evidence. And I forgot in those earlier videos to include Archie Hamilton, Mrs. Thatcher's private secretary for almost 2 decades. Sir Archie Hamilton, or Sir, is maybe a lord, I cannot remember. Okay, we're nearly at the bottom. So I thought we were onto another Coldstream connection, but this time it's actually in Douglas and Angus in Scotland again, part of the sectoring up of our great country. So there's the route into him. Hampel on the director for the anti-Semitic, the Eden Trust in Cornwall, Edward Allen John George, the boss at the Bank of England, and then suddenly we're introduced to the Grosvenor Group. And there's only 2 holdings for this man. Yeah, he's got the Douglas and Angus estates and the Coutts Company. So that's the end of the story, and my batteries are still live, and we could play Michael Bublé again, but I prefer just to get on, get this published, and then to get back to the really big issues. Yeah, and John Patterson, hopefully you will listen to this video, and I will never participate in a premeditated gesture to tear British or global citizens apart on sectarian issues, and I think you understand entirely the reasons for that decision. It leads to war and mass slaughter again and again and again, and it's just a cover up for these massive financial crimes. Okay, bye bye.